I'm Kevin Davis. This is the Catholic Family Podcast. And today, or tonight for me at least, we're talking about freedom of speech. And this is something that is really on the minds of many right now, especially regarding Elon Musk and his attempt to buy out the Twitter platform. I think $43 billion he's just offering in cash to buy the entire shebang. And I think it's something that many people are hoping for and wishing for and wanting him to do so that there is more freedom to talk about whatever we want. And that brings up an interesting and important topic, which is freedom of speech in how the Catholic Church sees it and what should we be allowed to say and to promote, and how much freedom should we be allowed to have. And I'm joined by Eric, Kenneth. These guys have been on the show before, and Grayson joining for the first time from Missouri. So, guys, I don't know where we want to get started with this, but I mean, maybe Eric, you and I have talked about this a little bit, and a little bit about the pros and cons, and is this good and is this bad? Eric, you're also the one who's not on Twitter, so that I think that you have an interesting perspective. You're the caveman over here. So Eric, what's your perspective on this, and what do you think about Elon Musk trying to take over the world?
Yeah, well, at a high level and I guess a political level, I'm sort of on board with it, right? I mean, in theory, he is looking to maybe not promote, like, I guess he's verbally promoting 100% free speech, but he's also trying to stop censorship, which on the surface, I don't think is a bad thing. I think we'll probably get more into the details of why pure and unadulterated free speech, at least as we understand it, isn't, all it's cracked up to be or a God-given right. But on the surface, I don't personally have a problem with Musk other than he's, an atheist with therefore no moral grounding. But I think, if I had a vote in the matter, I'd probably like to see it happen.
And he seems to have kind of transhumanistic ideas too. I just wonder what's his goal here. I don't really understand his politics, so to say, that he's all of a sudden seemingly for freedom of speech and kind of conservative values, and that kind of seems to come out of nowhere.
So my opinion is that he's a humanist, in that, humanity, mankind above all else type of thing, which sort of aligns well with the founders, of America. Americans founders, they were humanists, and a lot of the laws and the amendments, the First Amendment was kind of based on that. So honestly, I think he probably lines up pretty well with that, what you'd call sort of the classical liberal, which is sort of more libertarian leaning. That's how I see him.
And Kenneth or Grayson, what do you guys think? I don't know. Maybe Kenneth, I'll jump to you first. I mean,
Hmm.
what's your view on him as a humanist, or him promoting this? Are you a fan? I know you're more on Twitter than Eric is, at least. What are your thoughts?
Sometimes I see things that he tweets and I chuckle and I think that they're entertaining. Um, but if he were to become like the president of the United States, I don't think I would be supportive of him whatsoever. But when it comes to him purchasing Twitter, I think he would be an upgrade over how it currently is. But I think we just need to be careful as traditional Catholics to understand that that would be a means to an end. It would not be an end in itself of having absolute free speech, because the ideal of absolute free speech is what's gotten us into the mess that we're currently in. The reason why we fear censorship right now is because it's in the hands of atheist psychopaths that want power. Um, and so they have moral grounding, as Eric said. So they basically determine what morality is. And if someone speaks against their subjective values, then they can just use power to silence those individuals. But at the end of the day, censorship and the state having the authority to uh, deter thoughts that are objectively evil, that's something that we should support. And it's very natural to human beings to have that in society. All the way back in ancient Rome, they actually had a guy called the censor. That's where we get the word censorship. So it's not inherently or intrinsically evil to have censorship in society. It can actually be used for a good thing. Having classical liberalism allows secularism to basically be the state religion, and therefore censorship's inevitably going to happen. That's just how I see it. And if we have a secular state, that means the true religion will inevitably be censored, because the true religion is not tolerant, in the sense of, accepting false ideas and saying, "Oh, I'm okay, you're okay." That's not what the true religion does. It can't just get along to get along. I just messed up that phrase, but and then later I want to talk about the actual history of censorship in the United States, just to demonstrate that classical liberalism as an ideal is not uh, it's not sustainable. It's not actually possible to have in a society. It inevitably leads to censorship. Even in 1798, shortly after the signing of the Constitution, we had censorship occur in the United States. So I would like to get into that later, but I would like to also hear what Grayson thinks.
I'm thankful for the passing of the mic. So I would say, as far as goes with Musk purchasing Twitter, I would say tactically for us in the immediate sense, it's beneficial as Musk is more lenient on censorship than Twitter's currently progressive Silicon Valley management is, or in the past, Twitter has been known as being very heavy with the ban hammer and censoring. Even just recently on Easter Sunday, there was someone who simply posted "He is risen" on Twitter with a icon of Christ, and that was the third strike for some people mass flagging his account, and he got banned. He got kicked off the platform. With Musk having a more lenient sense of ownership of the platform, I think it'd be very beneficial for us in an immediate sense. However, the danger is just like with previous endorsements politically by traditional Catholics is some of the best things that we've gotten from politically has just been concessions from largely classical liberals or moderate conservatives. And they have ended up tying traditional Catholics to them and giving us a sense of Americanism. As far as free speech goes, I would say I'm certainly not a fan. I like to adhere to traditional principles of morality on that from popes like Leo XIII or king saints like King St. Louis IX, who were definitely pro-censorship as far as things go.
No, that's interesting, and I think that you see, as you say, that there was plenty of censorship in the past, whether it be good or bad, but it makes sense that it can't just be a free for all. I mean, because of all the tripe and garbage that's out there on the internet. I mean, there has to be someone who comes in and says, no, you're not allowed to say that. I mean, and either it's going to be a moral guideline, or it's going to be some sort of, I guess, political or authoritarian guideline. I guess it depends on who the authoritarian is, which obviously,
and
we would rather be
I think
the
you're
church.
hitting the nail on the head with who the authoritarian is, right? And so we have to be realistic about that. Looking forward the next forever, do we ever see a Catholic rising to the level of, being able to do that type of censoring? I think
I'm planning on running for president as soon as I can.
Okay.
2 more years. 2 more
He's
years.
got my vote.
And then when your term is up and the people elect another person, right? So I guess that would be my argument for free speech in the American sense, even the classical liberal sense, as being a lesser of two evils. In an ideal world, which we obviously don't live in, you have, the Catholic Church and, your monarchs or, presidents, whoever, adhering to this Catholic principle. And then that is sort of how things get filtered. In actuality, we don't have that. And by all looks of things, we probably never will, at least in our lifetimes. And so in that case, is not having that freedom of speech a lesser of two evils than getting censored, than the truth getting censored?
Could I actually just ask us all to have a definition of what free speech is? Because Elon Musk recently told us what his definition is, and I'd be interested to see how much our alignment of what free speech is aligns with what he thinks free speech is.
So I'm not on Twitter. What did he think free speech is?
Well, so he actually didn't do it on Twitter. It was in an
Oh.
interview. Should we do our own definition and then read Musk's, or should we read Musk's and then see what we agree or disagree with it?
But
Well,
are you
I-
saying the term as we think it should be, or the term as it is?
Maybe just the term as we understand it. Like, how do we currently conceptualize or define free speech versus how Elon
Yeah.
Musk does?
I mean, I guess I imagine it as, anyone being allowed to say anything no matter who disagrees with it. I mean, I guess that
Are we
simply, it's
all-
just kind of open to everything.
Yeah,
I would say that would be, for my mind, like the incorrect version of free speech, right? So what, Kevin, you're talking about is
Right.
license, right?
Mhm.
You have the license to just say whatever you want without repercussions or without, whatever. Repercussions, I think, is a good enough word there.
What about you, Grayson?
Oh, I was going to say that I assume, in reference to this podcast and this episode, we were primarily referring to free speech as defined in the American sense, meaning you have the freedom to express religion, identity, and speech, so long as it does not incite violence or violate law, of course.
Yeah, so here is Elon Musk's definition. This is all a quote. I think there is a grammatical error as well, so I'm just reading exactly what it says. A good sign as to whether there is free speech is someone you don't like allowed to say something you don't like? If that is the case, we have free speech. It's damn annoying when someone you don't like says something you don't like. That is the sign of a healthy, functioning free speech situation. So that's his understanding of freedom of speech, is that people who annoy you should be allowed to say what they want to say. And that's actually the sign of a healthy society. Do we think that that aligns with the American understanding, or is that off base of what we all just described?
So
Oof. Go ahead, Eric.
American
Yeah.
understanding, I think there's another sort of distinction that needs to be made there, right? What I would consider the American understanding of free speech is that the government can't censor, right? You can say whatever you want and the government doesn't have a place to censor it. That doesn't make it right. That doesn't give you license to do the free speech thing and say whatever you want. And it doesn't absolve you of all consequences from what you say. So I think with that distinction in mind, it's tough because what Musk is saying there, someone can say something to you that you don't like. That doesn't get into any realm of censorship or any who's doing the, who is doing the enforcing of censorship. So I think his definition, as given there, is sort of not enough information.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead, Grayson.
I was going to say that I agree with Eric. It's kind of shallow and not very specific. However, I would say from Musk's previous interactions and descriptions of himself, he would certainly be what we would coin or call a free speech absolutist or libertarian, in the sense that he heavily values freedom of speech to the point that even unsavory people he would say are permissible to talk or are worthy of talking or communicating with. Hence his interactions with other people who are heavily known for being censored. Like, for example, he's on the Joe Rogan Experience not too long ago.
And I mean, the libertarian form, as far as I understand, is that, anyone can say anything. So, I mean, they're literally saying there is no censorship, which means, okay, what about violent action? What about everyone meeting on Twitter and saying, hey, let's meet down on the street and we're going to have a riot? I mean, so that's a really interesting question too, because then, okay, you get into, okay, is that lawful to be able to meet on Twitter and say, hey, we're going to go commit a crime? Right. And I think the libertarians, as far as I understand, say you can, or am I wrong?
They would say there's the, what's it called, the non-aggression principle. It's like it's the only dogma that a libertarian has. So they would say that if you were going to plan to steal someone's life, liberty, or property, then that's actually a case where you can. They believe in a private police force. So at that point, your private police force could use coercive force on those individuals because they're breaking the non-aggression principle. I personally think that all was just nonsense what I just said, but that's what they believe. So they would actually be against organizing a riot because it goes against the non-aggression principle, but they would be all for a pedophile saying that they like to do certain things on Twitter, where we as traditional Catholic men would be horrified by that and say that that should be censored. That guy should be locked up. Like, that's how we maybe I shouldn't speak for everyone, but that's how I would react to someone posting something like that.
Oh, just locking them up?
Yeah, maybe a little bit further. So that's where I think we would have to start to contemplate to what extent we would actually want, like, to what extent is it actually better for society to go to a absolutist realm of free speech, because then to Kevin's point, we could have people going on forums saying things that we view as, or not even just what we view, but it's just objectively evil, intrinsically evil, that is allowed because it wouldn't be breaking the non-aggression principle. So for instance, I mean, homosexuality, people are pushing for, obviously, transgenderism. All these things that we know are objectively wrong could be openly advocated for. Is that
But they
actually
probably
better for
are
society?
already. I mean,
Well, that's
I
true.
guess that would be the argument, is that those things all are, and I'm sure Eric would agree with this now, that those things are already allowed and promoted, while
Well,
you have many
yes,
things on the other side that are not allowed to, say, criticize, COVID
that's
rules
true.
or whatever.
That's true, but we could be cutting off uh, our ability to actually say that those things are wrong by saying that they have a right to say those things, rather than to resist that and say, like, this is what I'm saying. Elon Musk is a means to an end. He's not an end in himself. To say that that's the solution, that will solve everything. To just say that those pedophiles and all those other people have the right to say what they're saying, that actually legitimizes what they're saying. And then what methodology do we have to overcome them? The only solution is what Pope Leo the 13th and Grayson discussed in Catholic morality and theology, is we actually have to have some form of censorship. Now, if we're saying that we would accept someone like Musk as a means to the end of getting until we can get the right person in control, then I guess I'm lenient towards that. But I'm just afraid that we're going back to what got us here. What got us in the situation that we're in? Classical liberalism. So just to go back to classical liberalism and say, "Oh yeah, that's the solution. That will solve it." It's like, well, no, we're just going in circles.
But it's a step in the
my
right
fear.
direction, right? Because as things currently stand now, there's pro homosexuality, pro transgenderism going on now, and opposition to that is silenced. In the Musk realm, you have that stuff probably going on too, but now the opposition is no longer silenced. It's sort of on equal footing. And your point is taken that that's not ideal. That's not the end game, absolutely. But from a purely realism perspective, is there an end game where we do have a Catholic in charge of Twitter, conduct?
I'd actually like to contest that for a second. Elon Musk earlier today tweeted out something akin to along the lines that he said that a perfect platform is one where the 10% of both the radical left and the 10% of the radical right are both unhappy. Essentially, what I think Musk is implicating is that he would have really no problem setting up his platform in such a way that even those who are, I guess, would be in the radical right, which would most likely include us just because of our relative stance to modern social norms, by most people's definition today, not my definition, but because of that, they would be pretty much okay with some sort of discretion or essentially some way of minimizing our effect on his platform. I would point out to other platforms that have tried to make money or rise up off of the free speech platform, like Parler or Gab.
I was going to bring up Parler. Oh, nightmare.
Yeah. Well, most of them end up stagnating, failing, or having to create some sort of counter economy in which they just live off a niche of right-wing customers, not really impacting the public forum like these larger platforms. What I'm curious about is, even if we take the pragmatic step of temporarily supporting Musk, will that actually help us, or will it just set us back in the sense that all those who had money previously or previously investing in Twitter simply pull out and create a new platform, which ends up in the future replacing it or even overtaking it, much like how Facebook overtook MySpace?
Well, and I think that's Musk's gamble, right? Kevin, what did you say he spent on his bid? 43 million?
I think it's 43 billion. 43 billion, I think, is the number of what he would offer.
You could probably do a pretty, good alternative site with $43 billion put towards it. I think Musk's gamble is, we've tried that already with Parler and these other things. And so taking a known quantity and now sort of freeing it in his mind from censorship is his gamble that might be more effective than trying to create something from scratch.
And so why is it that Twitter has worked? I mean, is it because they let the left do everything and the right is just we take it? we're just the ones who are just like, okay, we want to be here, but we'll let you take all of our what we want to say. I mean, why is it that Twitter works and Parler doesn't? Is it because honestly, from what I see, it's because the left actually stands by values and says, nope, we're not going to Parler. We're going to stay. I mean, but I guess they're also given more on Twitter. But what's the reason? Why is there success?
I think it got there first.
Well, that is my point, Kevin, is that inherently the classical liberal perspective is not natural. Like, it goes against human nature. It feeds on original sin, which is actually not natural to us. It may seem natural to us now, but it wasn't supposed to be that way.
It's natural to our fallen state.
Right. And so the reason that they win is their methodology is actually what is natural to us, like to have censorship, to have a code of values that you follow, even if they're the wrong ones, and even if they're using that censorship in the wrong way. That's how society is supposed to operate. Whereas right-wing people typically are classical liberals, and their only form of argumentation is what got us into the mess that we're in right now. So if only we could go back to the French Revolution, if only we could go back to the American Revolution, like those were the days. It's like, that's what literally got us to where we are now. Like, we need to look at what the left is doing and just understand that that's how human nature works. Like, and to Grayson's point, I think if Musk were to win, Twitter would basically just become what all those other platforms have been that have failed. And it's because it's just not natural to have just absolute freedom of speech. It doesn't work. Like, it's not what we're supposed to be like.
If I could have like a slight disagreement there, I would say that the main reason for the popularity of what would say the left-wing dominance of big social media companies is not just the fact that they're owned by largely progressive Californians in Silicon Valley who have a heavy amount of political and social control, but also because simply we're a small group. Simply, if social media is mainly about congregating ideas, values, and messages of the American population, and the American population is overwhelmingly progressive with the states that are red. Even though there's more red states than blue states, most red states are mainly rural, lower population, and are a lower market, and they're often a less expensive market as well. We have less money. Uh, as far as like business gambles go, overwhelmingly the progressive business moves is going to be worth more money. It's going to be worth more of the investment. And if, let's say, a big platform, like let's just say, like if Musk was a conservative Catholic billionaire and he bought out Google, Facebook, and Twitter, you would see likely all those platforms spawn again, but owned by progressives, because no progressive person will remain on the platform of a conservative billionaire.
But that's kind of one of my points, is that that's because the left doesn't give in while the right always does. The right will just bow down and say, yeah, we'll be part of Twitter because everyone else is. And the left is like, nope, we're not going. We're going to go on what we're comfortable with. The left won't join Parler.
Because we have more important things to think about. And I say the royal we, right? Our religion is actual religion, whereas their religion is that progressivism.
Exactly. What Eric just said is what I was trying to articulate, is that progressivism, the question I was going to ask you, Grayson, but I obviously didn't want to interrupt you, is why? Why are we small and they're big? It's because of the classical liberal model, where it basically turns conservatives into atomized individuals. They're like, I drive by a libertarian on my way to work and he has like a libertarian flag out, the don't tread on me flag. And it's like, well, great. Like, you have your own little plot of land where people won't tread on you. But guess what? Like, these progressives who have formed a groupthink and a religion, basically, that they all adhere to, they're in control of all of the institutions of society. So that's why they're winning, is they're using all of the methodologies that are supposed to be used to control a society, because their religion is progressivism, because we don't have a state religion. We just have classical liberalism at the heart of our country, the First Amendment.
Well, I would partially agree with you so far. I would say one thing, though, is also that a big reason for their dominance of why they're so popular, as I say, is that their lifestyle is significantly easier, and they have a full system so far where it's by far way more convenient. Even if you had a inkling or a slight push towards traditional Catholicism, you could end up risking your job. You could end up risking your family, your friends. It gets to a point where if we're to form an active resistance or some kind of pushback, there's an immense weight on our shoulders that we'd have to do. And right now, I would say a big reason why Eric is pushing for us to, tolerate the lesser evil here of tolerance and accepting our small position is because, well, I'd say because of our tolerance, we would have a much harder time resisting. And so if we tried to just go full radical, we might just get squashed.
Well, and maybe another way to look at it, right? This podcast hasn't been shut down because we have the freedom of speech. You know, how many...
And we're not big enough yet.
I know, not yet, but you know what I mean. How many thousands of traditional Catholics now have come there because of the freedom of the information and, people being able to say what they want. That shouldn't be overlooked from a practical perspective, right? Absolutely. In an ideal world, this libertarian view of freedom of speech has its flaws. But in today's world, where we're, the smallest minority of traditional Catholics, being able to still have these podcasts, have these talks, and not get completely and immediately shut down, we should be, if not supportive of it, see the silver lining to it.
Well, and I think that comes down also a lot in my mind to the argument of, like the Benedict option to an extreme, or do you go and do you hide away at home? Do you go the libertarian way, as Kenneth says, and you have your own plot of land and you say, come on, come get me, and I'm not going to be part of society? Or do you try to be in society and try to build a Catholic society? And I guess I guess I guess the ideal is, of course, we have a Catholic society and we help build a Catholic society. But the question is it realistic, or should we just stay out of it or be part of what they build themselves? I don't know if there's a right answer for that.
Yeah.
I would say something that I contest is, I guess I'd be the latter option in this case. I think there's a serious danger in us falling towards pragmatism, or essentially in that you can end up forgetting the truth of the Catholic religion, or becoming indifferent to your conditions around you due to the fact that you might feel as though there's no real change you can make or no real impact you can make. And the serious danger with that is replicating something like in post-revolutionary France, there were those who were called "quote unquote" liberal Catholics. People like I think there's a priest named Malebranche who had his writings put on the index because he tried very hard to mix the new revolutionary society's ideas with Catholicism and try to tolerate the revolutionary government that had come up in place. The primary problem with simply tolerating our conditions is that we can end up losing souls. Every day that this regime has power is a day that those who could be converted to traditional Catholicism could die and have their soul damned. It's certainly a ticking time bomb.
Yeah, no, I mean, I just 100% agree with that we shouldn't view it through the eyes of this world, because even if it's the pragmatic option, at what cost, I suppose? Like, I'm just thinking about it from my own soul. Like, I guess we just have to fight and not surrender our principles. So, I mean, if Musk wins, okay, great. It doesn't really change anything. If he loses, that doesn't change anything for me either. I'm going to have the moral principles of the church and try to apply those in my life as best as I can. And that's what the church does. Like, that's how the church handled Napoleon. That's how the church handled the French Revolution. Like, she stuck by her principles and adapted to what was going on. So that's what I mean is I don't think we can support Musk. If he wins, okay, cool. We can work with that. If he loses, we're already working with that. But we're not surrendering our principles. Whereas I personally feel like if I were to endorse absolute free speech just for a pragmatic solution, I would be surrendering my principles, which I'm not comfortable doing. And at some point, I would like to get into just the history of censorship in the United States. But Eric, if you wanted to jump in and say something.
Yeah, no, and just to make it clear, I hope I'm not sounding like I'm endorsing the libertarian view of free speech and the license to say whatever you want.
Right.
I just think let's not overlook where we're at today.
Right.
And the fact that, where in the whole entire world really is traditional Catholicism growing and the strongest. It's in this country that was founded with these principles. Not saying that's because of those principles. It's absolutely not. It's in spite of them. But at the same time, God works in mysterious ways. He may have used those founders, those Masonic founders and their Masonic principles to create this society that would actually allow the sort of rebirth of the Catholic Church.
Right. You get that strange mix of Puritan, and then you had the Freemasons, and then you had I don't know what's kind of founded now as you have so many patriots that they really feel something. And I think that means, and trust me, I live in Germany. I have a lot of experience now with Europeans, and they've got benefits for them too. They have the history behind them, and they have, the culture, which most of it's been lost. but I hear so often from them, oh, America, you weren't founded in a Catholic, Catholic foundation. It's like, yeah, that's true. But it's the same thing. I point to the same thing. It's like, okay, where are most of the State of Eight contests? By a large number, the most of them are in America, as you say. And I think that's a great question. And I think part of it is because Americans give their hearts fully to something. And I think that leads them also astray a lot. But Americans are hot and cold. They really believe, and they really love America. And I mean, yeah, America wasn't founded on everything good, but I mean, sometimes, yeah, it's good to feel something, I suppose. rather than these cold puritanical Germans over here. But no, I think that's a good chance for Kenneth to get into the history,
Yeah,
maybe,
I was gonna say,
kind of
that
talk
was-
about what makes America, and part of with the freedom of speech being a big part of that.
Well,
Good
this is
segue,
what-
Kevin.
Yeah, that was a good segue.
Yeah, you've been doing this for a while, huh?
That's why I get paid the big bucks.
This is what's so interesting about the whole proposition that's being laid down is like our country was founded on basically the First Amendment. The principle was we're not going to have an established religion. We're not going to have any laws of censorship for speech within reason. It doesn't say that in the First Amendment, but essentially, as jurisprudence went on, the founders started to realize, the country started to realize, we can't have absolute free speech. Like there's got to be laws against it. It actually came up 10 years after the Constitution went into effect with the Alien and Sedition Acts under John Adams' administration. And the Alien Acts don't so much affect what we're talking about, but they do come up during World War II. But the Sedition Acts basically made it illegal for people to have false information, so false speech. And it would fine people for using incorrect speech. And this is just 10 years after the Constitution came into existence. It wasn't deemed unconstitutional, but it did have an expiration date in the year 1800. And this law by Adams is what got Jefferson elected, because Jefferson was a staunch opponent to the Alien and Sedition Acts. But it doesn't go away. So it doesn't go away with the Alien and Sedition Acts. They come up again with Abraham Lincoln, of all people. Like when you think of America, you think of apple pie, George Washington, and Abraham Lincoln. Like those are the three things that you might think of first. But under Abraham Lincoln, he basically used this precedent from John Adams to limit civil liberties. And he argued that, people are using their civil liberties against the overarching common good of the United States. We're fighting a war right now. We're trying to preserve the Union. And these people are, using all sorts of propaganda and media to discourage this goal. So I'm going to limit and censor the civil liberties of these certain individuals. He also suspended the writ of habeas corpus. We won't go into that. And then during World War I, the Sedition Act rears its head again under Woodrow Wilson. And he used the same exact precedent as Lincoln and John Adams and said that not only are we going to censor ideas, but I believe it was the Committee of Information. That's what it was named. Wait 1 second. The Committee on Public Information is what he founded. And they not only censored false ideas, but they promoted ideas that Americans should think. So they no longer called hamburgers. They called them Liberty Burgers. I kid you not. That did not catch on. But they tried to prevent Americans from thinking like Germans. Like, we got to think like Americans. Liberty Burgers, among other things. So I guess what my point is, even in a classical liberal model, human nature inherently knows that certain ideas can't fly. And just in a commonsensical practice of living, you can't have someone shout fire in a movie theater and there is no fire. That person has to have repercussions for that. But even when push comes to shove and we're in a crisis, almost every government, pretty much every government that has ever existed, limits civil liberties and censors ideas. It's just a part of how society operates. And so, and if we were to pragmatically accept Musk as a solution, it inevitably is going to lead to censorship at some point. Like, so I guess what I'm having a hard time understanding is, if Musk is a means to an end, the end is still censorship. And how does Musk get us there? If, like, you know what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Mhm.
So I guess I would like to hear your guys' thoughts on the history of censorship in the United States. And then also, how does working with Musk pragmatically, like, where does it get us? Because it seems like inevitably classical liberalism still leads to censorship.
Before someone answers that, I've got to run real quick because my battery's about to die. I'll be right back. But
no.
you
Okay.
guys keep going. You guys keep going. I'll be right back.
Without our fearless leader, Grayson, I've been talking a lot. Why don't you?
Oh, thank you. I mean, I find the history interesting, and of course, I'm not a fan of Lincoln or Yankees, but it still got the point across. But when referring to the history of censorship, I would say it's critical to remember not just the United States history and American history, but also the history of, I should say, Catholic governments, because that would be what we're trying to imitate. A good example would be the Papal States. The Papal States under Pope St. Pius V, a wonderful pope and wonderful saint, was incredibly, I would say, if I remember correctly, it was very Catholic, but it was also very heavy on censure. There was people who considered his papacy and his rule over the Papal States to have turned the Papal States into a giant monastery, with his strict Catholic rigor and his strict adherence to Catholic principles. And I would say our goal as Catholics every day should be trying to imitate that and achieve it by any means that is morally allowed to us.
Yeah, totally. And what do you think, Eric, about, because it seemed, again, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it seems like you were entertaining the idea that perhaps Catholics should support Musk because it's better than what we have right now. And I guess tease that out.
Sure.
Like, why?
Yeah.
Because,
So I guess maybe that's not where I'm going. So
okay.
we say support Musk. What does that mean? Does that, obviously not financially, right? But
He doesn't need that.
he doesn't
He's
need it.
sending cars to
Um,
space.
Yeah. So, but the idea that instead of Twitter, which is only one of many channels of, we lost
Oh,
Grayson.
we lost Grayson.
One of many channels of communication, between people in the world, being controlled by hardcore leftists, progressives, and having the ability to censor anyone who disagrees with that. I think it is a better scenario to have a Twitter owned by some wacky billionaire who is not going to censor anything. Does that make sense? Like, I feel like I can make that distinction without saying I endorse the libertarian view of free speech.
Okay, well, here's my thing with that is, I actually think Twitter has banned and censored some things that are good. Like, I've heard of people posting like inappropriate, scandalous things that have been blocked. It sounds like Musk wouldn't do that. So
Mm-hmm.
to Grayson mentioned, like, looking at through the eyes of eternity, there most likely there have been children that have been exposed to bad things on Twitter. I'm not naive, but by getting rid of the censorship that's already in place, because we all know Twitter does censor things, imagine how many more souls are going to be exposed to things now that there isn't that censorship there. There already are things getting through that are bad, that I have to cross myself as I scroll through, because I'm like, that's just degenerate. And I scroll and I'm like, oh. But imagine if we didn't have any censorship. Like, well, I guess I would be like you. I just wouldn't go on Twitter. So, I mean, how is that
So-
better?
So it's the age-old question: do you convict an innocent person, or do you let a guilty one free? Right? Do you censor good and bad things? So do you censor truth and censor evil things, or do you censor nothing? Is there a better case scenario in there? And maybe there isn't. Maybe it's my naivete with what's on Twitter. That's like, if now all sorts of, bad things that are not on Twitter, and I just kind of assumed it was a free for all, except for, right wing thoughts. That was the only thing getting censored. If that's the case, then I think I still hold to that idea that it's a step in the right direction. If Twitter currently censors,
Parler is a good example. That Parler was supposedly this very free, and it was more free, and every other post was adult content.
yeah,
And that's just, and that's obviously, I didn't follow any of that stuff. That's just how it was. And that was because, I don't know, trolls or whatever was getting in there and publishing all this stuff, which I think that was probably an attempt to make people get off, because they knew, the trolls or whoever knew that was going to kick off your
No.
So if your point, Kenneth, is that Twitter currently has censorship on adult content as well as censorship on, right-leaning thoughts, and Musk is going to remove both of them, then I see what you're saying, that, it's probably not even a net positive in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, that is what I'm saying. And Grayson, go ahead. You were going to say something.
Oh, thank you. Well, I was going to say I disagree with Mr. Davis about Parler. I would say probably the biggest, this is also like a business thing. One of the huge incentives as a market online is actually adult content and adult material. And we can already bet, as a billionaire, Asona cares very much about his bottom line. The first thing that we're going to see with Musk's lowering of the censorship walls is just like when the leftist site Tumblr banned adult content, they made a mass exodus to Twitter. And if with even less censorship on Twitter now, I can already see it being purely an occasion of sin just to have an account on the website.
No, but that's my point, though. Parler was the same. Parler was supposedly much more free than Twitter. And Parler, that's the point. I mean, Parler, because it didn't have that censorship, it just had smut everywhere. And so I think Twitter, I agree. I think that's the danger. I think we're all saying the same thing.
Yeah,
The danger is that if you make it all free, then you're going to have the ability, even if they're not your normal people, you're going to have trolls and people who now want to undermine Musk. They're going to go on there and just, get bots to that's all they're going to publish. And I think that's what happened with Parler.
Publish adult content.
Exactly.
I was going to say that I don't even think it'll be trolls. I think it'll be very genuine people. It's a huge market line.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, absolutely. But I think that they know that your Christians are maybe not all, but many would also leave. I mean, I left Parler because I was like, okay, I mean, I'm not going to spend time on here, obviously. And I think there are enough people who would do that too. So I think they know, okay, they can get they can get plenty of guys who are going to be on there anyway, and they can get the actual true conservatives or Christians off by spamming people with it. And so I think it's a win-win for the bad guys, I suppose. But I mean, maybe Musk will not allow that. Who knows? We don't really know entirely what he would allow and what he wouldn't. I mean, he does seem to think it's going to be everything, but maybe he's not going to allow adult content. I guess we may have to see.
Yeah, he hasn't exactly thought through all of his policies because at one point he was like, I'm going to add an edit button to tweets. And then someone was like, well, wait, what if someone gets a viral tweet and then they change it to say something like racist? And then it seems like everyone likes this racist idea. And then he was like, that's a good point. And then he was like, well, maybe we just won't let people or the likes and the retweets will disappear when someone edits their tweet. And then people were like, what? So like he hasn't really like fully thought it all out, which is another reason to be hesitant, because he doesn't necessarily seem like he has principles in line for how this would go. So I guess I would just be cautiously optimistic, but I just fear that it would end up like Parler, with the adult content, because I mean, there are things that show up on my Twitter feed that are like, you have to connect the dots to understand like that's what that is. And I'm just like, oh, that's gross. But like it would be in your face if we got rid of the censorship that's there. So I actually think it would be a net negative in the long run for the souls that are being exposed. And meanwhile, I see amazing things on my Twitter timeline as well, with the current censorship. If you're smart and you don't say like certain things that you know are going to get you in trouble, like the amount of traditional Catholics that I've met and come across and the ideas that they have and the sources that they present, I'm like, wow, like it's changed my life, some of the things that I've seen. So I would hate to have to delete my Twitter account because it's just filled with adult content, that because there's no censorship. So that's my perspective.
I bet you Musk is not going to allow it. I think he's a smart enough guy that I don't think he's moral, but I think, I don't know. My instinct is he's not going to allow that kind of stuff. I don't know. I think we'll really have to find out. I think it'll be really interesting to see, but I think that it's an interesting question, the moral question. I mean, I publish these videos to YouTube because YouTube has by far the most people to watch. And so I get the benefit of a bigger audience, and I hope the audience gets the benefit of good content. But YouTube, all the time, I have for goodness sake, I have a Catholic channel. All I ever have is maybe on this channel, maybe I'll listen to like Palestrina or something. And still on the front page at times, they'll have like women in bikinis and stuff. And it's just like, what on earth is it? Am I really supporting the, and I come back to it all the time, and people always ask, are you ever going to get off YouTube? And it's a real dilemma, because it's like, okay, is it worth, the reaching people to provide good content on the platform when the platform itself is promoting, not just allowing, but promoting to me bad content? And that's a tough one. And that's one that, again, I mean, I don't know if there's a right answer for it, unfortunately.
I'm sorry, I've been talking a lot. This is like the last thing I'll say for a little bit. I just want to advocate to everyone to download AdBlock Plus. It is a app that will block pop-ups and like those little things when you're scrolling, how there's those sponsored ads. It will block them. And like I've seen so many immoral advertisements that I did not ask for, as near occasions of sin. And this will block those. So totally erases that from your life. AdBlock Plus.
It also erases everything else from your computer. And
I was gonna say, are you actually getting a commission from AdBlock Plus?
No,
it feels like sponsored content.
I guess
in the background, he's got a McAfee sticker on the.
I did that last time with the books that I was pulling out. I was like, buy this. But no, I mean, it just helped me. Maybe it is a virus or something. I don't know, but it
sounds good though.
Yeah, I got it advocated to me when I was at Steubenville.
Okay.
And it helped a lot. But now I'm done talking for a little bit.
You're good.
No, it's a good question. I think that these topics always come down to different issues. I mean, the moral side, the ideal side, and the realistic side. I think that's all Eric's been saying. I don't think Eric, again, is promoting Elon Musk or his taking over Twitter. The question is, what world do we live in? I mean, we do live in a real world. We do all hope and wish for Christ to be the king of society. Obviously, of course, that's the case, and that's what we should promote. And the question is, and I think this is a really, really good question, is how do we do that? And of course, we start in ourselves and in our homes. How do we do that with society? And I think that's the question that I think comes back all the time in this show, because that's almost the question in many ways. How do we have Christ as the king of the society when the world is obviously clearly against Christ and against God? And I think that's a tough question. Do we go into the world, or do we stay out of it?
I think I'd like to start on this. I guess to start on this question, it would probably be one of the last few things I say because I've certainly hogged the mic for a little bit, in my opinion.
No worries.
But I would say something that is probably the most important is that we have to remember divine providence and stop focusing so much on our immediate concerns. After all, God took Jericho with only a few men with horns. He could take America with probably less people. Uh, we need to keep a constant reminder that for our goal, even though it's very lofty, we have the strongest ally on our side in the entire universe. And we should keep that in mind every time when we act.
And so and you're totally right. So what does that mean? Does that mean we go out and we have banners and signs on our backs for the faith? I mean, does it mean to just live a good life? Does it mean to be a good example? I mean, because I think that's you're totally right. But to what extent? What are our actions? Do we do like the Mormons, and do we knock on the doors and say, "Hey, I want to tell you about the Catholic faith"?
I would say, traditional Catholics, especially in America. When I attended the young adult gathering at St. Gertrude's, I met quite a lot of people who were cradle Catholics. And I can say it was certainly a very insular community. I would say if you're a convert, it can be kind of daunting, especially coming from the outside. And so I would say one of the best things we can do in this heavily Protestant country is go out and evangelize. It's almost like a new world again, just like missionaries coming over from Spain and France. We have this large non-Catholic society with non-Catholic people, plenty of them ignorant of the faith. I'd say one of the best things we can do is get out there and be vocal and be serious.
But vocal. So what do you mean by that? What does that mean? Vocal how? Vocal like literally like the Mormons, or vocal like we're going to be good examples at the grocery store? You know what I mean?
I would say it'd be both as in the sense that there are people who are ignorant intellectually, in the sense they have literally no idea what traditional Catholicism is. All they hear about is Pope Francis on the news, and also be good examples for the faith, and also make sure that people know what good examples in the faith look like.
No, I think you're right. Go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, so I'm reminded of this graphic, and so I'm one of those cradle Catholics, homeschooled kindergarten through 12th grade, that type of thing. And one of our religion books, I think early on, had this page of like the efficacy of, and it wasn't conversion, but it was, of whatever it was. And they had this cannon, and I like guns, so they had this big old cannon, like this monstrous cannon, and that cannon was prayer and sacrifice. And then they had this big old bayoneted rifle, and that was example. And then they had this, I think it was either like a tiny little pistol or a tiny knife that was verbal and evangelization. And the point there being, that's actually the efficacy ratings of these things that we can do. So Kevin, to your point, what do we do in the society? Prayer and sacrifice is your cannon. That's the big gun. And then what everyone always, I think, gets backwards is example versus preaching, right? Example is actually a much, much better preacher than knocking on doors, doing the Mormon thing. And so just going to work every day, showing Catholic morals. People ask you about your kids. Oh, you have 5 kids. That type of thing. Did I break up? That is actually going to bring more souls to the truth than, walking up to a stranger in King Soopers and saying, "Hey, join the Catholic Church, the traditional Catholic Church."
Right. And I think that it's even somewhere in between, or not in between. I agree with everything you say. I mean, but I think we're all given chances in our lives, maybe some more than others, to have that chance to have a not with a random person, but say a colleague or a friend or a family member. When you have that chance to actually try to plant the seed. And I think, I know, speaking for myself, that's really easy to pass up. And it's really easy to be like, no, I don't want to fight. I'm not comfortable enough in my faith, or I don't know the arguments, so I'm not going to. And I think that's a really good point, that maybe we don't have to be the Mormons, we don't have to go knock on doors, but we have to be ready. We have to know our apologetics and know our faith enough so that when that chance, because it will come. I mean, we've all had it, I'm sure. It will come. You got to be ready for it.
just because that verbal was a knife or a pistol or whatever it was doesn't mean it's still not useful. Absolutely.
For sure. Right. No, I think that's, and I guess in the end, I guess to wrap up the conversation, I think the moral, it's kind of morally vague, because unfortunately there are no, there's no right or wrong answer, as Kenneth said. If he takes over, if Musk takes over and he brings this free speech, which maybe for temporary it could help, say if he doesn't allow adult content, it's all based on going back to going back. And that's what people, it's like with the COVID virus, everyone's like, yes, we are finally back to where we were, no more masks, no more blah blah blah. And it's like, great. And so the world's so good, it's perfect, we're exactly where we want to be. Of course we're not. I mean, the world's a mess, but I think that, yeah, I think we have to be realistic and not be too pessimistic, and I think as Grayson said, to be aware of divine providence and not get too mucked up in all of the little details. But it's still good, I think, to have these conversations, and I think that's what I love about this show, being able to talk with guys from around the US, from around the world, to hash it out a little bit, because I think that's really important to be able to maybe grasp things a little bit better, get different opinions, get different viewpoints, and see what comes out in the end. And I think in the end, I think we all pretty much agree it's not a perfect situation. Any last words? Let's go last words. Grayson, go ahead. You sound like you had something to say. Go ahead, make that comment and then have a last word, or that can be your last word too.
Oh, well, no, this can be my last word. I would say, to pretty much sum up, I would say traditional Catholics today have a huge problem with indifferentism and Americanism. And the main thing that I want to get across today is that we need to remember divine providence, be active, be zealous, and if necessary, it's fine occasionally to drop concern for current conditions, especially if the faith demands it.
Good. Yeah, well said. Eric, last words?
Yeah, no more than I think what we've already talked about. I go back to my sort of beating on that drum of, a society is only as good as the people that make it up. So let's be the best people we can, and make our friends and family the best they can be. And that's really how we're going to fix society, not from the top down.
Good. Kenneth?
I guess the principle of subsidiarity is something that we should all contemplate. We can't change who's the president necessarily, but we can build relationships with our neighbors and get involved in local politics, actually figure out who your state rep is, like stuff like that. And try and control what you can, or change what you can in life, not control, because you don't want to be like control freak. And just, I really like what Eric said about prayer and sacrifice. It goes a really long way, and sometimes we don't see it, but there's a story that I just want to tell really quickly of St. Therese of Lisieux, where she would pray and just trust God. So she would just say, God, send your graces to where they're most needed in my life, in the lives of my loved ones, for the world, and for the church. And she'd do that every day. And then eventually one day a cardinal visited her, oh gosh, I'm blanking on the name, not monastery. Convent. And he requested to meet all the sisters. And then he saw Therese of Lisieux and he said, you're the one who's been praying for me. And then she was like, what? Like, what are you talking about? And then he was like, I saw a dream and God told me, he showed me a sister and said, this is the one who prayed for you to become a cardinal. And she was like, I haven't been praying for you. Like, I've just been praying to God to send his graces to where they're most needed. So like, she had no idea the effect that prayer was having, but it had a monumental impact. So just small little things like that go a really long way. And that's what we can do. That's all I would like to say.
Awesome. No, it's a great way to end it. Yeah, and I would like to, I should have done this at the beginning of the show, but I forgot, but I would really like to thank Father Borja and my dad, especially for all the work they put into the Lent Around the World series. I know that many people appreciated all the content that was created during the Lenten season. We didn't do as many podcasts, but but a lot of good content from people recording from all over the place, and a lot of work put in by Father Borja and by my dad, who really produced pretty much the entire series. My dad, that is, Father Borja recorded his own. And really, really thank you to them for that. I think it was truly beneficial, and I'm sure that they earned graces for that. And yeah, for everyone watching the show, we hope you enjoyed it. Please like, share, and subscribe, comment, disagree with us, agree with us. You know, it's a free world, right? You can say whatever you want. So
You have the license to say whatever you want.
You have a license to say whatever you want. Exactly. So, but if you have any complaints, go ahead and send them to Eric. I only take nice things. So if you have anything nice to say about the show, go ahead and email it to kevin89davis@gmail.com. Anything else, and you can find these guys on Twitter, or Eric, you can send by mail, or I don't even know. I mean, maybe throw a rock in his direction.
Smoke signals. I do.
Smoke signals. Yeah, the caveman over here. No, I really appreciate it, Eric, Grayson, Kenneth. Until next time, God bless.
God bless you.
God bless you.